When 28-year-old Julia Meyer texted her sister on a rainy Friday evening, it was supposed to be the start of a peaceful weekend. Made it safe, quiet out here, might not have signal later. Love you, the message read. Julia had been invited to spend a few days at her boyfriend Eric's family-owned lake house in Vermont. Tucked far into the forest and right on the water, the old cabin was serene, remote, and according to Eric, the perfect place to disconnect. Julia loved the idea. Life in Boston was chaotic, and a break sounded wonderful. She left work early that Friday, packed a duffel bag, and made the 3-hour drive to the secluded house. Eric was already there when she arrived, having taken the day off. According to neighbors, though none lived closer than half a mile, they were seen unloading groceries and laughing on the porch before nightfall. That was the last confirmed sighting of Julia Meyer. The next day, her sister tried to call, but the line went straight to voicemail. Julia had warned that reception might be bad, so no one panicked. But by Sunday, when she still hadn't replied to any texts or returned home, concern turned into alarm. Eric claimed they had a disagreement Saturday morning, and Julia had decided to leave early. He said she packed her things and drove off alone around 9 a.m. But Julia's car was never seen on any traffic cameras. She didn't stop at the gas station she usually visited, nor was her phone ever active near a major roadway. When police searched the property, they found her car still parked behind the house. Inside were her keys, her overnight bag, and her phone, which had been tossed near the edge of the dock, the screen shattered. Strangely, the phone's draft folder contained an unsent message. "Someone's in the house." Eric denied seeing the message or knowing anything about its context. He said they were alone the entire time. There were no signs of forced entry, no defensive wounds on Eric, and no blood or physical evidence of foul play. Cadaver dogs sniffed around the property in the woods but found nothing. Divers scoured the lake. Days turned to weeks, then to months. The trail went cold. Friends described Julia as cautious, level-headed, and never one to vanish without notice. She didn't do drugs, didn't drink excessively, and had no history of mental illness. She had just started a new job she loved and was planning a trip to Europe. Nothing suggested she wanted to disappear or harm herself. As the years passed, the story of Julia Meyer took on a spectral quality. Locals claimed they saw strange figures standing on the dock late at night, or lights flickering in the supposedly empty cabin. One hiker swore they heard someone whispering from within the trees by the lake, though no one was there. Urban legends began to grow around the lake house, of people who went there and came back, different or never at all. Eric moved away and refused to speak to media after the first year. Though never charged, public suspicion followed him. He sold the lake house 2 years later to a couple from New Jersey who stayed there only one weekend before putting it back on the market, citing unexplainable disturbances. Julia's unsent message remains one of the most haunting aspects of the case. It's still unclear whether it was meant for her sister, Eric, or someone else entirely. All investigators could agree on was the timestamp. It was typed out at 3:17 a.m. on Saturday morning, a time when Eric claimed both he and Julia had been asleep. The case remains open, but hope is faint. The woods have grown thicker around the lake, the dock has begun to rot, and the cabin stands silent, its windows boarded and paint peeling. But sometimes visitors claim that if you stand at the edge of the water, just before sunrise, you can still hear a phone vibrating, somewhere just out of reach beneath the surface. Cameron Lewis was a 34-year-old truck driver from Missouri who'd driven cross-country routes for nearly a decade. He knew the roads, the rest stops, and the best diners in every state. He was dependable, organized, and always kept in touch with his younger sister, Lacey, during hauls. Every night, he'd send a text to let her know where he was parked and what town he'd be passing through next. But in October of 2020, something shifted. Cameron had a long run from Colorado to Pennsylvania. On the third day of his drive, he texted Lacey at 9:43 p.m. from a rest area in Indiana. "Stopping for the night. This place has got weird vibes, but I'm wiped. Chat tomorrow." She replied right away with a thumbs up and a heart. At 2:17 a.m., her phone buzzed again. It was a picture message from Cameron. No caption, just a blurry photo taken from inside the cab of his truck. The image was dark and grainy, lit only by the dashboard. The road ahead was empty, but in the passenger seat, clearly visible in the grainy darkness, sat a pale figure. Its face was undefined, its head slightly tilted, and its outline too sharp to be a trick of light. Lacey immediately called Cameron, but the line rang and rang. No answer. She texted, then emailed, then called again. When the sun came up, she called his company. They confirmed his truck had not moved since 10 p.m. the previous night. State troopers found the semi parked neatly at the rest stop. The door was locked. His bag, wallet, and logbook were still inside. The engine was cold. There were no signs of a struggle, no blood, no indication of where he'd gone. But his phone was missing, along with one shoe and his ball cap. Surveillance footage showed him pulling in and stepping out briefly to stretch, and then nothing. No one else approached the truck. No figures, no disturbances, no suspicious vehicles. It was as if he'd vanished into the air. Authorities reviewed traffic cameras, checked hospitals, ran forensics. Nothing. His face was never picked up by another camera, and his bank account was untouched. The last ping from his phone came from that exact rest stop, minutes before the photo was sent. Internet sleuths dissected the image. Some claimed it was a glitch, a smudge on the lens, or a reflection, but others pointed out details. The alignment of the seatbelt, the way the figure's body seemed to cast a faint shadow across the dashboard. One user even brightened the photo and claimed the figure had no eyes. Lacey was tormented by the image. She showed it to detectives who admitted it was strange but inconclusive. Cameron's employer was cooperative but had no leads. They confirmed that Cameron had an excellent record, no debt, no enemies. He didn't suffer from hallucinations, nor was he interested in the paranormal. He was just a man doing his job. And then he was gone. Months passed. The truck was eventually reassigned, the investigation filed under unresolved, and life went on. But Lacey never stopped looking. She posted the photo online under anonymous accounts, hoping someone might recognize the figure or the feeling. She received countless responses, hoaxes, trolls, and claims of similar sightings. But one message stood out. It was from another trucker who'd once parked at that same rest stop 3 years earlier. He said he'd seen something standing beside his trailer around 3 a.m. Something tall, still, and watching. He never stopped there again. To this day, Lacey keeps a copy of the photo framed in her apartment. She says it doesn't scare her anymore. It just reminds her that some things on the road can't be explained. The digital file has been analyzed, dissected, and debated by experts and amateurs alike. But no one can say what it truly shows. Cameron Lewis was never found. And that last photo, that chilling, silent snapshot from the passenger seat, remains the only clue to his disappearance. In the winter of 2015, 19-year-old college student Brianna Callahan returned home to rural Vermont for winter break. Her parents were on vacation in Florida, so she stayed alone in their old farmhouse near the edge of a dense forest. It wasn't unusual. She'd done it the year before without any issues. The house was isolated, but Brianna loved the quiet. She spent her days reading, baking, and texting with friends from school. Everything was normal until the third night. That night, temperatures had dropped well below freezing. Brianna had a habit of texting her best friend Kara before bed. At 10:04 p.m., she sent, "So cold tonight. Feels creepy being here alone, lol." Kara replied with a joke and a heart emoji. At 11:27 p.m., Kara received another message. "I think someone's in the house." No context, no follow-up, just that one message. Kara immediately texted back, asking what she meant, if she was okay, if she should call someone. There was no reply. She tried calling, but it went straight to voicemail. At first, she assumed it was a prank. Maybe Brianna was trying to scare her. But when there was still no response by morning, she contacted Brianna's older brother, who lived 2 towns away. He drove to the house that afternoon. Snow had fallen overnight, but there were no tracks in the driveway. The front door was locked. Inside, the house was cold. The heater had shut off. Brianna's phone was on the kitchen table, its battery dead. Her laptop was still open on the couch. Her bag, coat, boots, everything was in place. But Brianna was gone. There were no signs of forced entry, no blood, no overturned furniture. Her bed was neatly made, and a half-drunk cup of tea sat on the nightstand. It was as if she'd simply walked out into the snowy woods barefoot and never came back. Police launched a search that lasted nearly 2 weeks. Volunteers, dogs, and drones scoured the surrounding forest. They found nothing. No footprints, no torn clothing, no evidence she'd left the house at all. The only clue remained that final text. "I think someone's in the house." Her phone was examined. There were no outgoing calls after that message, no camera roll entries, no audio recordings. One tech-savvy friend pulled the metadata from the message and noted it had been sent using the house Wi-Fi at exactly 11:27:13 p.m., which meant her phone was still inside the house when it was sent. Local authorities were baffled. They theorized a break-in, but nothing supported that idea. There were no footprints outside the windows, and the locks were undisturbed. A few suggested she may have suffered a mental breakdown and wandered off, but her behavior leading up to the event didn't support it. She had no history of trauma or instability. What disturbed investigators the most, however, was what they found in the attic. Brianna rarely went up there. The space was cramped and dusty, filled with holiday decorations and storage bins. But during their search, an officer noticed the attic door slightly ajar. Inside, tucked behind a stack of boxes, was a sleeping bag, several empty food wrappers, and an old baby monitor. The receiving end of the monitor was found in Brianna's bedroom, plugged in but turned off. Someone had been living in the attic. That discovery changed everything. It suggested someone had been watching her for days, maybe weeks, listening to her movements, waiting. But no fingerprints were found, no DNA. Whoever had been up there was gone. After that, the case went cold. The farmhouse was sold the following year. Brianna's family moved away. Her disappearance was never solved. No body was found. No ransom note. No further messages. Only that single final text remained. A chilling whisper of dread sent moments before she vanished forever. Over time, the story gained traction online. True crime forums debated the baby monitor. Paranormal enthusiasts suggested something darker. A few Reddit users claimed the house had a reputation, that other families had reported strange sounds or missing items years earlier. But nothing concrete ever surfaced. No one was arrested, and Brianna Callahan remains listed as a missing person, her name etched into local memory as a reminder of how quickly someone can disappear, even from the safety of their own home. Jasmine Reed was a 31-year-old paralegal living in Nashville, Tennessee. Known for her meticulous work and quiet demeanor, she wasn't one to stir drama or attract attention. But in April of 2019, everything changed when she began dating a man she met through a mutual friend, a private contractor named Kevin. He was charming, successful, and polite to everyone she introduced him to. But there were signs, small ones, that something was off. Her friends said she became more withdrawn after a few months of dating him. She stopped coming to weekend brunches, canceled plans last minute, and started screening her calls. One friend recalled a strange dinner where Jasmine seemed nervous, constantly checking her phone and looking toward the entrance, as if expecting someone to walk in. Then one afternoon, Jasmine sent an unusual text to her sister Carla. It read, "If something happens to me, look into him. Please don't ignore this." That message arrived at 2:41 p.m. on a Tuesday. Carla called her immediately, alarmed, but Jasmine didn't pick up. When she texted back asking for more details, Jasmine replied, "Can't talk now. We'll explain later." But later never came. Jasmine failed to return home that night. The next day, her boss reported her absence to the police after she missed work without notice. Her car was found parked near a popular walking trail on the outskirts of the city. Keys still in the ignition, phone missing, purse on the passenger seat. It was as if she'd stepped out for a walk and never returned. Search teams combed the area for days. Dogs picked up a scent for a few hundred yards along the trail, but it vanished near a creek. Drones scanned the dense woods, but there was no sign of her. No footprints, no torn clothing, no indication of a struggle. And Kevin, the boyfriend, claimed he hadn't seen her in 3 days. According to him, they had argued and she stopped responding to his messages. But Jasmine's friends were skeptical. They said she'd grown increasingly afraid of Kevin in the weeks before she vanished. One even claimed Jasmine had confided in her, saying he was possessive, showed up uninvited, and once threatened to make her disappear if she ever left him. Police interviewed Kevin, but he had a solid alibi. He was seen on security footage checking into a hotel for a work trip several hours away at the time Jasmine disappeared. Still, they searched his home and car. Nothing incriminating was found. The text Jasmine sent to her sister became the centerpiece of the investigation. and its greatest mystery. Her wording was deliberate, clear, and alarming. It implied fear, even a prediction of her own vanishing. But with no body, no crime scene, and no digital trail beyond the message, there was little the police could act on. Then came the twist. 2 weeks later, a private investigator hired by Jasmine's family discovered a storage unit registered in her name. Inside were journals, printed emails, and a small USB drive. Jasmine had been documenting strange incidents for months. Unexplained scratches on her car, photos that had been moved in her apartment, late-night phone calls from blocked numbers. She believed Kevin was stalking her, even after they began dating. One journal entry read, "I think he was watching me long before we met." Another, "There are things he says, little slips, that make me think he knows things he shouldn't. About my past, about my sister. It's like he studied me." Despite this cache of information, nothing directly tied Kevin to her disappearance. He denied everything. Without Jasmine to testify or concrete evidence, no charges were filed. Eventually, the case stalled. Years later, true crime podcasts picked up her story. Reddit threads dissected every clue. Amateur sleuths pointed out inconsistencies in Kevin's story. Some even tracked down old co-workers who described him as obsessed with control and creepily attentive to detail. But legally, Kevin remained a free man, and Jasmine remained missing. Her family still clings to that one chilling text, treating it as both a warning and a cry for justice. "If something happens to me, look into him." It's been etched into online forums, crime documentaries, and missing persons blogs. A haunting final message from a woman who sensed the darkness closing in and tried, in her final moments, to leave behind a flashlight for others to follow. The last anyone saw of David Larkins was on a snowy January evening in 2021. A 26-year-old software engineer from Boulder, Colorado, David had always been described as grounded, logical, and deeply skeptical of anything he couldn't explain with science. He lived alone, hiked on weekends, and gamed with friends at night. Nothing about him suggested a man who would unravel, but unravel he did. In the weeks leading up to his disappearance, David's friends noticed strange behavior. He'd started asking unusual questions during their Discord chats. Things like, "Do you ever feel like your body's not yours?" Or, "What if we're all copies and the real us is gone?" His friends chalked it up to late-night exhaustion or a quarter-life crisis. But the tone of his messages became darker. He once posted an image of his own reflection and wrote, "I don't think this is me anymore." Then the text started. David began messaging his ex-girlfriend, Emily, whom he hadn't spoken to in nearly 2 years. At first, they were innocent enough. Questions about whether she'd ever felt disconnected or wrong inside her own skin. She ignored most of them, but one message sent 3 days before he vanished stood out. "I think I'm being overwritten." On the day he disappeared, David called in sick to work. That afternoon at 3:27 p.m., Emily received a final message from him. "Don't come looking for me. I'm not me anymore." She thought it was a joke or a weird metaphor for depression. She replied, asking if he needed help. He didn't answer. David's apartment was found in perfect condition. Nothing was missing, nothing out of place. His laptop was shut down, his phone on the kitchen counter. But his boots were gone, and a security camera captured him leaving the building at 3:35 p.m., wearing a heavy coat and carrying nothing but a small black notebook. That was the last confirmed sighting. Police combed through his life, looking for signs of instability. David had no history of mental illness, no debts, no family drama. His browser history was filled with searches about consciousness, identity loss, simulation theory. In his notebook, recovered from a nearby hiking trail, were frantic entries. Some were scribbled over and crossed out, others nearly illegible. One page read, "I caught myself blinking out of sync with the mirror." Another, "Sometimes I dream of being in two places at once. Then I wake up and I don't know which one is real." The strangest part was what his neighbor told police. She claimed she'd seen David in the hallway the night after he supposedly vanished. She remembered it clearly because he looked strange, standing motionless with a blank expression near the stairwell. When she greeted him, he didn't respond, just turned and walked slowly back toward his apartment. But the security logs showed no such entry. His key card hadn't been used. And when officers checked the hallway camera, the footage from that hour was corrupted, glitched, a digital smear of static and shadows, as if something had briefly disrupted the system. 2 days later, another resident claimed to see someone who looked like David standing across the street at night, watching the building. But when they blinked, he was gone. The sighting stopped after that. Some internet sleuths believed David had suffered a psychotic break and wandered off into the woods, possibly to take his own life. But no body was ever found, and no evidence of self-harm was uncovered. Others leaned into the weirder aspects of his case, suggesting that David had stumbled into some kind of altered reality or suffered a mental collapse triggered by obsessive research into consciousness theory. But the most unsettling theory came from his own writing. One final note in the notebook, dated the day of his disappearance, read, "He comes in my sleep and tries on my skin. One night he won't take it off." Whether it was metaphor, madness, or something far more disturbing, no one knows. To this day, David's disappearance remains unsolved. His chilling final message, "I'm not me anymore," has been quoted endlessly on Reddit, YouTube, and even tattooed by fans of strange phenomena. Some see it as a cry for help, others a warning from someone who glimpsed behind the curtain and saw something he was never meant to see.